planning for local health departments. As Marita stated, my first session on succession planning focused on why we should do it, and we discussed some triggers that motivate organizations to do it. And during my second session, I talked about how it's done. Again, this presentation is the third of a three-part series offered by your Public Health Training Center, thanks to Marita and Joanna. And in this session, I'm going to be providing two case studies about how succession planning was done. If you viewed my first two presentations about succession planning and you've since had some thoughts like the ones listed in this slide, then I feel that my time spent developing this information is worthwhile. Even prior to these sessions, I'm sure that your local health department has been doing succession planning to one degree or another. You might not have called it that, but I hope I got your attention and you've been thinking about how you can use some of this information to improve your process. And I know that learning about succession planning isn't the most exciting or sexy topic, but it's really important to understand it and then to do something more about it. And hopefully after today's session, you'll have a few more nuggets of knowledge to help you along in the process. In my previous presentation, I talked about typical steps that can be followed for doing succession planning. This slide describes a basic succession planning framework. And as I stated before, it's important to remember that the steps taken for succession planning will vary among local health departments. That's important to remember. This is because you all have different resources available to you, different policies, culture, attitudes, and this means that succession planning should be flexible and adaptable in order to accommodate different situations. So just a quick, with this framework, it's a guide, basic guide, and some of the activities that it includes. Some of the things we've talked about is establishing a list of key positions and when they become vacated, assessing key competencies that the individuals will need to be successful in the position, identifying and assessing their potential, developing action plans for developing succession candidates, and then utilizing metrics to evaluate progress and measure outcomes. The concept of succession planning is relatively new, and as you may be learning, as you probably know, and how even how it's defined continues to evolve, quite frankly. As I mentioned in my last presentation last month, succession planning is a subset of workforce development, and generally speaking, as illustrated by this table in the slide, when you're doing succession planning for positions other than management, the term succession planning changes to succession management. I think we all know that we need to be looking at this stuff since, again, succession planning is a subset of workforce development, and we all know that workforce development is something that's covered under Domain 8 as far as your accreditation process. And I'm sure you're beginning to work on that if you haven't already done so. The objectives, I have two primary objectives for this presentation. One is for you to learn how one local health department went about developing and implementing a succession plan for several other management level positions. And then I have a second objective is for you to learn from an example about how a local health department went about developing a succession plan for their director. I'm using these two examples because some of you indicated that you were interested in succession planning 2 or 3 levels down in your local health department, and some of the others wanted to learn more about what to do when your top person needs to be replaced. So let's take a look at case study 1. The first case study that I'll walk you through started when 3 of the 6 managers in the nursing division of a local health department notified the Board of Health that they were all retiring in the next year. Each had worked for the local health department at least 30 years, and they were just ready to hang it up. The scope of the succession plan in this case has been determined. Remember, we talked about scope last time, so it's been determined. You had 3 nursing program managers that were going to be retiring in 1 year. And the Board of Health in this situation wanted to ensure that they had excellent candidates to fill these jobs. So they had recently learned about succession planning from their health commissioner, and they gave her the marching orders to try this concept out. So with the board's blessing, the health commissioner immediately went to work on this project. It's always just a side note. It's always helpful to know the timetable in advance for when individuals working, especially in critical positions, are planning to retire. And as you probably know, employees have a right to privacy and confidentiality about their retirement plans. And your administration can't enforce employees that disclose their retirement plans until that employee decides to start the retirement process. But in this particular case, the managers were open and willing to find their successors, and having a 1-year notice worked out very well in this particular situation. So the health commissioner's first priority was to select individuals to serve on a succession planning team. And so she quickly selected she selected the 3 outgoing managers as members of the team, and the other members she selected were the HR director, nursing director, and the IT manager. And she decided to lead the team on her own. So at their initial meeting, they agreed to meet every Monday morning, 8 o'clock, for at least an hour, and they understood that this process would last at least a year. And once the team was set up, the group met and outlined the process and reviewed the responsibilities and commitments. That's always important. They also developed a communication plan. They wanted to raise the level of awareness among all the staff regarding what they were up to, and so they sent out an email describing what they were doing it and asked for feedback, even anonymous feedback, but from anyone that had concerns. And they also, of course, highlighted this in their employee newsletter. So overall, the team's primary objective for the communication strategy was they wanted to reduce some fear and get some support. And they wanted to make sure the process was transparent. So considering the context here, at their second meeting, the succession planning team conducted an environmental scan. And this was an exercise to help define functions of the nursing division looking into the future, the next 2 and 5 years. And they especially, focused on the 3 programs where the managers were retiring, and they gave, this gave the team both a short-term and a kind of a long-term perspective to anticipate, what the future needs would be. And so they addressed each of the, in my slide, they addressed each of the challenging questions in the topical orders that I've listed. For example, for external environmental concerns, they discussed funding and customer expectations. For internal challenges, they talked about potential workforce challenges, and they actually concluded that the nursing division and these particular 3 programs were likely to remain pretty much intact for the next 3 to 5 years. They also looked at the strategic plan and acknowledged that there was no indication of any restructuring, and they also discussed the culture, labor relations, values, and they concluded that the 6-unit nursing division structure, which was staffed by 67 registered nurses, would continue to work pretty well over the next 5 years. And they did note that, in particular, how Affordable Care Act and social media and other technological advances would likely change some of the responsibilities in the next few years, and that would be a good idea to have technical savvy managers. So that's one of the things that they looked at. So in the local health department where this case study was portrayed, the program management positions were exempt and not represented under the local health department's collective bargaining agreement. So these were exempt positions, and as such, when you got exempt, these management employees are considered employees at will. And employees that they supervised, however, they were covered by civil service statutes and collective bargaining agreements. And as such, situation, the administration was not required to promote employees to these management positions when they became available. In other words, they could fill them any way they wanted to. So they weren't required to fill them with promote internal employees. So the succession planning team, they agonized over whether to just consider internal candidates or hire or look at external candidates for these management positions, and they felt that developing an inside person or inside persons for management positions would help them ensure that the institutional knowledge would be preserved, and they also felt that probably a greater likelihood of success if they could find people internal. And actually, one of the succession planning team members, he actually described how he, having been personally developed and groomed for a position, he was a major supporter of this, and he said that a major benefit of being groomed and developed for a position helped him to cultivate those existing relationships you have in your organization, and that he had with employees, and this helped him to hit the ground running when he was promoted. However, I think on the other hand, one of the succession planning team members did voice some concerns about developing inside candidates for manager, and her concerns or her rationale was that inside candidates would have a more difficult time supervising people who were previously peers. And you've probably seen this yourself, and this can, people can overcome this, but it can be difficult. She was also concerned that if they looked at only internal candidates, that would limit the pool size. That's obvious. And then she also had concerns about having internal candidates there might be some ethical concerns like favoritism. So as the succession planning team continued to agonize over this, one team member stated, and this particular team member was one of the retiring managers, he thought that an external candidate could bring new ideas and new life to the health department. And for some organizations, this is just what they need. And the team agreed that there are times when it's best to bring in an outsider, especially for smaller organizations, and that don't have as much internal bench strength. And weak internal bench strength, by the way, means that there's nobody in the organization with the skills that have the skills that are required for the job. Also, it could be that there are no internal employees that are interested. They don't want the job. So that's what internal bench strength is about. But at the end of their debate, the team agreed that hiring the wrong person was a greater risk when they were looking at the outside, bringing someone from the outside. And hiring mistakes could cause serious problems and set the local health department back, and I think all know about that. So they discussed how hiring a person from the outside could also breed internal distrust, and how it could lead to morale problems. And the team, what they decided to do is focus their efforts on finding internal people to replace all three of their retiring managers. Talk a little bit about defining the competencies. The succession planning team considered the duties that each manager was to perform. They determined the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and other personal characteristics that the candidates would need to be successful in the job. They profiled the KSAs using the existing, the existing managers' job descriptions, and they basically the team determined that the leadership competencies that they felt were needed for individuals to succeed in these positions. They came up with they reviewed the Council on Linkages. You may may be familiar with those, the Tier 2 program management level competencies. They did find these helpful. At the end of the day, they identified 7 management competencies, which are listed on this slide. These are the 7 that they felt were the most important and that they would focus on. The team reviewed and updated each of the 3 nursing program managers' job descriptions. These needed to be updated, and since only health department employed nurses were going to be considered for the talent pool, they felt that the functional or technical competencies specific to nursing wouldn't be an issue. And in this case, the position descriptions required the same KSAs. They were all similar since we're looking at program manager. They were all similar because we're looking at program management positions under the nursing division. And since the competencies that they agreed to focus on had been defined, what they did then is they identified some behaviors that demonstrated them. And this of course takes some time, but the team felt that the time they took to do this was well worth it. As I mentioned before, the team decided that their strategy would be to develop internal employees for all 3 of these nursing manager positions. And they settled on creating 1 internal pool to use to eventually, hopefully, select new managers from. The team, again, discussed the importance of keeping this an open process. They wanted to they wanted to keep employees informed, but they didn't want to raise any expectations about guaranteed promotions. This is very important. They want to make sure that they were clear to everyone about the purpose and outcomes of the process, but that this was no guarantee of guaranteed promotions. So the succession planning team decided to offer an open program that let eligible employees, those with, and they specified they preferred those with RNs with at least 3 years of experience. And so they let eligible employees self-select through an application process. And the team, they conferred with the civil service and union people, and they confirmed that by using this process, they were able to avoid pre-selection and pre-positioning concerns. 9 employees applied, and all were accepted into the pool. And the team agreed that some very able candidates had nominated themselves for the pool, and they probably presented much less of a risk than the outsiders were. So they were glad that they used this method, this process. By using the process, they offered opportunities to employees who were committed to the health department and people who were seriously considered in advancing to management level positions. So after they did assess the pool, after assessing the pool, the team agreed that the nurses each had at least 5 years experience, so they possessed the functional and technical competencies that were required for the job. But unfortunately, none had ever worked as a manager, so they decided they would have to provide both specific development opportunities individually and in a group. And so what they did is they devised development plans, like I talked about in my last presentation, for persons. They devised development plans for each person in the talent pool, and they felt that if they missed any KSAs, these would be addressed through some of the other components of the process. The team decided to create a nursing management academy to provide the talent pool members with opportunities to acquire those 7 previously identified competency areas that I talked about. They arranged for an expert in each of the 7 competency areas to develop month-long programs with they arrange, they have these experts create some readings and lectures and assignments, both online and face-to-face. And this management academy ran for 7 months. And faculty from a university provided expertise on 3 of the competencies areas, and the local hospital had an administrator that did the training for 2 other competencies. A Board of Health member and the health commissioner, they co-taught another one. The director of nursing was responsible for the other, or the remaining competencies. So members of the talent pool were made aware that the management academy and the developmental activities were designated by the health department to accelerate their professional growth, and it was up to them as individuals, to perform and develop in a manner that would make them improve their abilities and help them to take on more responsibilities as new managers if they were selected. I need to note that participation in the talent pool process is not the selection process for a position or a guarantee that any participants will eventually be selected. All the employment decisions, hiring positions, are based on on their qualifications and fairness, and talent. In my opinion, talent pool members are essentially internal competitors for a position. Besides training together in the talent pool, the team provided other specific development opportunities for each of the members. These included things that I've listed in the slide. One I want to mention is stretch assignments. These are important, and because the research tells us that some of the most powerful learning comes from stretch assignments. And these are assignments that help employees stretch their abilities beyond their day-to-day duties, and it helps them build competencies and confidence. It's important talk a little bit about knowledge transfer. The current soon-to-retire managers were highly valuable resources when it came to this. Obviously, their knowledge of the health department, culture, and their programs. These are things that can't be taught in a classroom setting, and probably would be missed in some of the hands-on stuff like the stretch assignments. But this is where mentoring and coaching can be valuable. A seasoned manager sometimes may not even be conscious of some of the critical aspects of the jobs, whereas some of the people who are shadowing may catch, a shrewd future manager might catch some of those nuances while they're doing some shadowing. It's always important for measurement, establish some metrics. The succession planning team, they were responsible for identifying the overall succession planning metrics and the measures that were identified and the expected outcomes of the development activities that the candidates would be involved in. A system for tracking the metrics was created, and this was very helpful. In the end, it really helped determine the return on the investment of the process. The metrics were measured on a quarterly basis. This slide lists 2 of the basic evaluation questions that helped to establish the metrics. The succession planning team continued to meet regularly on a weekly basis. They monitored and collected the data, and they made sure that all these strategies, they meet the needs of the process. In a few places they had to tweak things and maybe tailor some of the specifically tailor some of the development opportunities for some of the candidates. They documented the competencies that were developed. They got feedback from the different management academy instructors and from the managers that were involved in the development activities. Um, at the end of the day, 2 of the 9 nurses dropped out of the pool about midway, actually. 2 nurses at the end of the training confirmed that the training was beneficial and that they learned a lot, but they decided not to be considered for these management positions. Feedback from individuals that were doing, providing the trainings, they identified 3 of the participants as high potentials and 2 as potentials. So after they carefully reviewed the outcomes on the evaluations and the final metrics, the team confirmed that, and then there was consensus that the 3 high potentials would be offered promotions as program managers. So that concludes my case 1 study. Moving on to case 2. This is my second case study, and this case study involves a local health department director.
Hans,
yes.
I just want to say, this is Marita. I want to apologize for the beeping in the background. There's nothing we can do about that. Somebody's put their phone on hold. So even by me making this announcement, they won't hear it. That's why Joanna put something in the chat box. So we apologize. You're doing a great job in spite of it, but there's nothing we can do. So you just move on.
I appreciate that. It's a little annoying, but I just will move on. Thank you. Okay, so case study 2. This case study involves a local health department director, and it's important for any of you that are listening in, since you may one day be selected to step in when your local health department director is absent. In this case, the case study, the director had a chronic illness that was continuing to worsen, but he didn't want to. He wasn't ready to retire. Didn't want to retire. So one board member pushed for the need for some type of a plan. Since they started from scratch, the board requested the development of a basic plan, something to use to build upon the future. The director in this case was a little reluctant, but he finally agreed that the local health department should have some kind of a plan. And in this case study, the board was trying to become more proactive, and that's important. That rather than wait and be reactive when the director became absent again. So a succession team was established that was made up of the director and 3 board members, and actually the team included the champion identified in bullet 3 of my last slide. Remember, I mentioned in my first presentation how important it is to have a champion, and also the team included the HR director. Their first order of business was to review the director's job description, which they discovered had not been updated in 10 years. And so they had the director craft an updated PD and made sure that he included specific competencies required for someone to be successful in his position. And he was able actually to get a template from NHL to help him with this, and he finally crafted the template, and it was updated and approved by the board. And the team the team agreed they wanted to start small, and they wanted to start by developing some succession planning procedures. And the procedures they developed for their plan would describe the steps that be taken by the board and staff in the absence of their director. So the committee, first thing they determined, they needed to clearly define some parameters. What they wanted covered under these procedures. So they listed, the list, it's in this slide, is what they came up with, and they felt most of these would be covered by any type of scenario. So absence, typically defined 30 days or more. Planned absence, this is maybe something that's anticipated, like a vacation, a sabbatical, or elective medical treatment. Unplanned absence, something that comes up unexpectedly, such an illness or death. Short term is 30 to 90 days. Long term, they decide to be 91 days. Temporary is something it's expected the director will return to work, and then permanent absence, of course, is when director's not expected to return. And of course, the director was a little uncomfortable. It was a little awkward working on this, but as the committee discussed this, but in the end, they made it through. So the procedures developed by the committee outline the director's responsibilities for different situations or scenarios that might occur. And the committee felt it was important to have provisions in the plan where the director was required to discuss with the board chair in timely fashion any types of leaves, planned, short-term, long-term, temporary, etc. And whenever possible, obtain the chair's approval for these absences. They also include a provision that the director, during his annual performance evaluation, performance review, discuss with the board any intentions about potential plans for leaving the health department, especially if it was something that was going to occur within the next 12 months. The procedures also include provisions with some responsibilities for the board too. And these include ensuring that, obviously ensuring that the policy was implemented and communicating with staff, stakeholders, and partners when implementation was taking place, and ensuring that the director's annual performance review process included discussion about his anticipated length of employment, like I mentioned in the last slide. Procedures were developed to address when the director was off for short leave, or long-term, temporary, planned, or unplanned absences. And if the director was incapacitated or otherwise unable to perform his duties, the board would then, the procedures dictated the board would designate an acting director, and they would actually look at internal staff. And these are, some of you folks listening in, and what they'd be looking for is, your current performance, your length of time with the organization, your overall knowledge about the public health and your relationship with the other employees and managers, and relationships with the key partners out there. It was important for the team, the committee, to delineate the authority and restrictions of the acting director. So the procedures were written that provided the director with full authority for day-to-day decision making that essentially are outlined in the job description, the new job description which was created. Some exceptions were outlined as I have in the slide here. These included decisions that involve hiring, terminations of management team people, legal issues outside day-to-day operations, new project initiations, and taking public policy positions not previously endorsed by the board. Oh, compensation. This is important. I think this is important, and this needs to be written. And the reason we're doing this is because you don't want to be in a crisis mode when something happens. You want to be proactive. Remember, that's why they're doing this. This is part of succession planning, and people they need to know. They should know up front about the ones that are stepping in. Are they going to get more money? The committee agreed that people taking on extra responsibilities when acting as when being the acting health director, they should receive a salary increase or some type of a bonus. And if there's long-term absences, then maybe the salary adjustments need to be negotiated. And of course, for the director that's on leave of absence, it always goes without saying that he or she would be eligible for their salary and benefits that are consistent with their local health department policy. The acting director under this plan would report to the chair of the board of directors or the board of health. And a protocol was developed for the director to follow, as far as when to alert the board chair about special needs, and also how often they'd talk, when they would talk, or when they would meet. And also part of the oversight would be that there would be a complete review done of the acting director between the first 30 and 45 days of his or her tenure. What this slide describes the plan in the event of a permanent unplanned absence in which the director is unable to continue serving during a transition. And what happens here is the board appoints an acting director. The board gives consideration to the need to hire an interim director, and then, as the slide states, the decision to hire an interim director is guided by the internal pool that's available for an acting candidate or acting director, and the expected time frame for hiring a director. And if they decide they need an interim director, then the board chair will let staff know. They'll need to discuss a hiring time frame. They'll do some assessments. They'll conduct interviews, and then hire an interim director for the position. So basically, that was the conclusion of my case study 2. Of course, that was just a short-term proactive. They wanted a basic plan, and I'm just trying to illustrate that, succession plans come in all different sizes, shapes, and forms. And it's given the time constraints, I can't get into more different scenarios. But anyhow, let's take a look at evaluation. I can't end this presentation without talking about evaluation, and I'm sure that you know this, but this is just a reminder. There are two types, or there are two elements in all evaluation: process and outcome, and both should be evaluated. So in both of these cases that we just went over, both should we need to evaluate, but we need to evaluate both the process and the outcome. The process, of course, refers to the procedures and the activities undertaken to achieve the goals, and the outcome refers to the results of the process. An evaluation or assessment process is important to your local health department's learning and growth. And when a plan is completed, a local health department should review to see what worked, what didn't work, and then based on some analysis, determine what's next. In addition to regular ongoing evaluation of your plan and its outcomes, once the actual transition has taken place, you should do a post-succession assessment to evaluate the results of that, and then lessons learned from this evaluation will help you improve the process. So there are several key questions to ask when evaluating outcomes. I have these listed here. The main question is, did we get the right person? It usually doesn't take much time, unfortunately, to realize whether the right person was hired or whether a hiring mistake was made. And we all know this is not fun, and it's very expensive. But either way, succession planning should continue. However, if the wrong person is selected, then you need to take immediate action to correct the mistake. And usually you have probationary provisions for people moving into different positions. And corrective action can involve what is called inverse promotion, or in other words, use the term demotion. And demoted employees, whenever possible, in my opinion, they should be transferred to a different unit. They shouldn't go back to the one they came from if this is possible. If the wrong person was selected, it's important, figure out why this happened and try to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So in both the cases that I went over this afternoon, evaluations were conducted. And evaluation provides feedback on the process and the outcome of the plan. Without evaluation, of course, how will a local health department know if it accomplished what it set out to be, what it set out to do? So ultimately, how will we know if the program is successful? So with evaluation, the local health department knows if changes are needed or processes have to be modified, and it determines, evaluation determines if the goals or outcomes have been achieved. And it helps guide the future, development of the future. In this final slide that I have, I decided to leave you with some questions, some things for you to ponder. And these are things like these are things that I've talked about, and things you need to think about. Who will lead your succession planning initiative? How will the process be linked to strategy or strategic plan? What are the competencies? What are the core competencies? What are the leadership competencies, the technical, functional competencies you're looking at? You need to understand how those work. It's important for management. How's management going to be involved? What are the critical positions? We mentioned this at the last presentation, how we identify those, how we look at, do assessments for the future, evaluate, do gap analysis. What's your talent review process for identifying employees with strong potential, and how will they be assessed? How will development planning be done? Will the process be open, which is very important in my opinion? And how will high potentials know that they've been identified? So this concludes my presentation, and again, thanks so much for tuning in, and we can open it up for questions.
15 minutes. I'm sorry, I was still on mute. Hans, thank you very much. It was a very wonderful presentation. I enjoyed the entire series. We now have almost 15 minutes for discussions, so please take advantage of Hans' expertise. This is the last opportunity that we'll have to talk to him live, so I turn it over to our participants.
Hi, Marita. It's Kathy from Putnam, and Rick and Barbara, and we decided that the best way to approach this is just hire Dr. Smalltree to come in and do succession planning for us, because it's totally overwhelming.
Ooh, well, thank you. I'm glad that you think he's so wonderful. Hans, how do you react to that?
Oh, well, that's the best compliment a person can get. I appreciate that. It's not so overwhelming. You just take it step by step, and again, these are, we just provided some, in my presentation, some overviews. There's a lot of resource material out there, and I'm always happy to help you out in any way. You can, you get my contact information from Joanna and Marita, and happy to help you out in any way.
But we're looking at this, and okay, right now, and we're not alone, I'm sure other counties are in the same position, we're in the middle of applying for accreditation, so we have a team, a small team together that's leading that, which takes an enormous amount of time. We're a small department, so we're looking at it and we're saying, how could we ever come up with, a succession planning team? I mean, we don't have the people or the time. It's overwhelming, and I think maybe if we go back through and look at the slides again and get some pointers off of it, maybe there's, stuff that we could look at and maybe not do it so formalized. I don't know. It's just because we are looking at in the next 5 years, our entire management staff, every single one, will be walking out the door.
That is overwhelming, but it can be done. I think, taking baby steps, try not to bite off more than you can chew. Yeah, great idea. Go back through the slides. Again, happy to help you, and there's lots of resources out there. I do feel it's very important that especially you're going to be losing your management team, you still have time, with that 5-year time period. So you have time to work on this, but you need to get started soon. And again, even with limited resources, there's lots you can do, and there's probably lots you're already doing.
Right there when
We're trying.
I was talking to Spencer.
But hi, Stu, how are you?
Someone's talking in the background, the male voice. If you can just mute your phone, that would be appreciated. Colleen, please unmute your phone and ask your question if you can. If not, Hans, just if you can look in the chat box, Colleen asked you a question as well.
Hi, Marita. Hi, all. This is Janice. The question was, two questions. What would be some marks of successful succession planning? I mean, you're doing it, you planned it, you think you have a great team. How do you know that you're doing it right?
Well, that's an excellent question. And maybe this isn't the answer you want, but you know that you are successful when you have an adequate pool of skilled leaders and professionals prepared to meet the future needs of your local health department. And also, you know you're successful when the gaps between current competency levels and the levels required to be an effective leader or professional have been reduced, and high-quality people are ready to fill positions when vacancies occur. I don't know if that's what you wanted to hear, but those are some true signs of measuring success and knowing when you are a success.
So it sounds that succession planners is not something, doesn't start when we put a team together, but it's an organizational culture.
Yeah, you can call it that. It's good to incorporate succession planning as part of your culture. That is ideal, yes. And succession planning, the thing to remember too, it isn't something, you really don't see success for probably 2-3 years out. And succession planning takes time, and you have to continue to update and tweak it as time goes on, and you keep adding to it. So that's why you start out small and gain some early successes, and that's the way I've seen it done, and when I've been involved, that's been the best way to do it. Start out small, working, and very important too, like we've talked about in the other presentations, it's important for people to have some knowledge about it and have champions and to push it forward, even though there's all kinds of other things going on. Probably one of the most important things that your management team, your administration, your governing board can do is succession planning, because those are the people who run your organization. And if they're gone and you don't have people properly trained to do those jobs, then your organization is in for trouble.
Right, so it sounds like when I'm talking about a culture, it seems that there should be built-in opportunities where I think the example you used, stretch exercises, where folks are able to practice some of those or participate in stretch exercises or in some of those development opportunities like you talked about in case one, where there was a specialized academy where folks had the opportunity to learn above and beyond what their daily tasks were. I think that takes some forward thinking.
Yeah, it does take some forward thinking, and number one, it's always nice if you've got it built into your local health department strategic plan that you're gonna, you have it as a goal to begin some succession planning. And again, starting out small and building, and then focusing maybe on just one particular area. If you don't have, if you're a small operation and you don't have the resources, but anything you do to move it forward and get the dialogue going and to minimize, try to reduce any kind of fear about it. That's probably the biggest hurdle that I saw is the fear and the reluctance to want to move ahead and think that it was for one thing, it seems like a daunting task, but it's really not if you just try to do it in steps and pieces. And if you get the people who have the some passion for it, that see the value in it. And once you get going, I think that you'll find that you'll get some momentum and you'll be able to get some early successes. Someone else asked a question, let's see, how do you ensure that you're doing it right? What can you use to ensure that you're doing it right? Succession planning and succession planning, there's really probably no right or wrong way to do it. There's some basic tenets you want to probably follow, and we've got different steps and procedures and pieces that you want to look at, but as I mentioned before, they come in all different sizes, shapes, and forms. But again, the way you know you're doing it right, if you've got high quality people that are available in positions when vacancies occur, that's when you know you're doing it right. And we can learn, again, that's why the evaluation part's important. So you can learn what you did wrong, what you did right, how you can improve it. It's a continuous, quality improvement process, basically. You continue to try to improve it. Are there any other questions out there?
Hans, this is Marita, and I know you tried to address this in the second webinar, but I'll ask you one more time for those who are new to this call, and the question is, how is succession planning impacted by a union environment where seniority is required to be part of the promotion process?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, and again, this is another good question, and I mentioned I'm a board member for the Toledo-Lucas County Health Department, and I think we have about 4 unions. So I'm learning actually, and we have a union here at the university that was just voted in last year, and I'm in administration, so I'm not a member, but I have to write the policies and all that. So anyhow, I have I'm interested in this, and it's helpful to remember that when we're doing succession planning, we're not promising the next open position to any one particular employee. Succession planning is about identifying and developing a number of candidates so that we have a pool of qualified candidates who may be ready to apply for an open position when it becomes available. I think that's how we get around that pre-selection issue.
And at this point, I would like to thank you very, very much for your time and effort and the knowledge and experience that you shared with us over the last number of months. This concludes this particular webinar series for our center. I'm just going to turn the phone back over to Joanna to remind you of any last items.
Great. Hans, thank you again so much for your presentation today. Following this call, I'll be sending out Dr. Schmalzri's contact information, as he graciously offered to provide that to you for follow-up questions. I'll also send out copies of his slides so that you have those. He has listed extensive resources and references with each of them, so that should provide you with some good starting points to start your own succession planning processes. In addition, please mark your calendar for our next webinar, which is February 24th. That's also Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. Dr. Diana Hernandez will be discussing how to moderate a focus group, and registration information and the invitation for that will be coming out shortly. So thanks, everybody, for joining